All right, so welcome Saturday, GamesU, NeonCon. My name is Boyan Radakovich. Most of you guys know me as Bo. I'm a freelance game designer. And for the 2010 pipeline, I've got 5 games coming out. And a lot of that comes to my ability to actually pitch the concept, sell the dream to another publisher, and have them carry the game forward. I was also the lead game designer for Shifting Skies Games. My first game was nominated for Origins Award 2007. It was a totally awesome honor. I was up there with Rainer Knizia, James Ernest, Mike Sellinger, Steve Jackson, and me. So it's like my first year out, that's sort of pretty good company. And it came down to a very close vote, but Munchkin beat me out. I'm also the founding member of SAGA, which is Southern Arizona Gamers Association. We work with the community to put on conventions, organize the community around gaming, kind of teach the cognitive benefits of gaming, and give it basically a platform for the industry to get closer to Arizona, right? Beyond that, I'm also convention director for RinCon, so I know a lot of what it takes to put on a show like this as well. And one of the coolest features is the seminar track, which gives players opportunity to meet their favorite game designers, sometimes play with them. You get that kind of expertise. And that's the kind of stuff that you can only really do at conventions. So beyond that, I was also the marketing director for a distributor, PSI. And we took product. We did a market evaluation for products that were submitted in. We tried to find the best way of matching it to the right channel. So mostly at this convention, this is a hobby games channel. You know, you see a lot of sort of adventure games, role-playing games, board games that are typically higher in strategy, things like that. Not exactly mainstream games. You're not going to see like Parcheesi and that kind of stuff, right? Bananagrams is amazing best-selling game out there. If you haven't seen it, it's this really cute anagram game. Comes in a little banana packaging. That thing sells like, well, it sells like bananas, right? It sells like 5 times more than Apples to Apples did. And Apples to Apples is like, right, everyone knows Apples to Apples. So everyone will know Bananagrams as well. So PSI helped put that into Barnes & Noble. Now, some products are good for certain markets and not others. Okay, so this is actually part 2 of yesterday's seminar. I'm just going to kind of very quickly gloss over what we covered yesterday, give you the lay of the land of the industry. You guys are game designers. That's actually only one phase of the process. Okay, in fact, I would say it's maybe, if all things being equal, 1/5 of the process. Okay. You have a design, you're going to take it through concept phase, alpha stage, where you're testing the thing, beta stage, where you have it kind of polished and ready to go, right? At that point, you can either publish it yourself, in which case you have to carry that ball through the next 4 steps, right, yourself, or you give it to someone else to produce it for you. Right? Next step is production phase. It's market evaluation. You're trying to figure out where it's supposed to go, what's the best angle for selling it. You do the art direction, try to make it match the vision, right? And then you go out and you actually try to push it into sales. If you're a board game, you need to get print buying. You need to actually go find a manufacturer to actually produce the product for you. If you're a role-playing publisher, you're looking for books. Some people now just strictly go electronic. That's perfectly acceptable. If you're, well, I'm trying to make this more generic to the entertainment industry itself. So whatever field you're trying to do, is it a book product or?
No, it's actual museum.
A physical museum.
Physical.
Okay, so the production phase for you would be a lot more intricate, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's still the production phase. You're trying to take that concept and trying to marry it to your vision, right? From there, you go sales and marketing. This is where you're trying to take that product and cash it in, okay? If you're a game designer and you just want your name on a cover, right, that's great. But when you give it to someone else, they don't really care about that unless it helps them sell, right? So I know it's kind of, this is my industry bias, okay? My bias is that this is an entertainment product, and it needs to find the right market. And the gameplay itself may not be the most important aspect of it, right? Sales and marketing, you got brand management. You're trying to find, you're going to put your game with the right match as far as the publisher goes, right? Every company has a sort of character in what they produce. Some are very broad. They take almost all submissions. They're in multiple channels. They do gift trade. They do book trade. They do mass market. They do hobby. Some are exclusively hobby, right? And they do very well there. Some are even smaller than that. They, really only do railroad games or whatever, and that's fine. But every slice is slightly smaller, right? So to have a robust, if you have a product that's very robust and can hit multiple channels, that's going to be really good for you, right? If you have a product that's serving a niche, that's okay. You just have to know how to sell to that specific person, or hopefully more than one person, right? That's where you get solicitation, pre-orders. You're trying to get out there and get some money coming in. If you've done this right, you've done the advertising and marketing already. Basically, if you have all these things lined up correctly, the marketing is basically starting off as soon as you're going into production, so that by the time it actually shows up, people have the hype, and it's not like it just showed up, off the container, and you're like, okay, now what? Let's go sell it, and no one knows about it, right? You want to kind of time this thing right. At which point, you need to go into distribution. Movies, books, games, they all use distribution models. Some of them are a little bit different. In the hobby trade, they're predominantly, it's the bottleneck, right? Many publishers, many game designers, fewer publishers, very few distributors. They have the control of that channel, right? So if you're trying to get into hobby trade and you're not with Alliance, ACD, and GTS, you've missed, right? Like, you need to get the top three, and you need them to basically support you and carry this thing forward. Because if you have a game and you have basically a warehouse full of your game, you're the one that's picking, packing, shipping, taking orders, doing the accounting, doing all that stuff. But actually, I'm just a game designer. That's the thing I like. So now you're suddenly trying to learn these skills that you're maybe not that good at, right? And giving it to someone else, a distribution partner, is good. Of course, they're going to take their slice for it, and maybe it's a good deal. It's a good bargain for you. Especially with the accounting, you need to be confident that they are a reliable source, because for most freelancers, you're paid on royalties, basically percentage of sales. So if you're an author and you sell books into like Barnes & Noble or whatever, and Barnes & Noble comes back and tells you, oh yeah, we sold this many copies, well, you get X percentage of that many copies. It's the same for book trade, it's the same for movies, and so on. You need to make sure that those numbers are real. And if this is your livelihood, right, it becomes an important part, right? That residual stream of income coming in. Hopefully, if you have multiple products, if one's not doing well or one's tailing off, another one comes up, and you have this little layers of residual income coming in. So that's distribution, and then it goes community support. Community support's convention and retail support, going out and helping people understand what the product is, doing demos, giving out swag. A lot of this is just real kind of street team effort. You can do a lot with guerrilla tactics, Facebook, Twitter, make it much easier for your consumer to follow you. So nowadays, I don't know how to say it. I sort of have this theory where if you had $1 million company, creative destruction with the internet has taken it and destroyed it into $1,000 companies, And for Twitter, it's free. So it's actually even easier for you to go out there and pound the pavement instead of going directly to an ad agency or something like that. Now, the major players are still doing well, right? But they're obviously, they have to compete and they have to adapt as well to the new market. Also in community support is where, hopefully at this point, as a designer, you're back in this process. Because remember, you started off with the design, you gave it off, they carried that ball through, and now they want you back. They want you running demos. They want you pushing the pavement because no one's going to know the game better than you, right? Because you created it. It's your baby. Okay? That's sort of lay of the land. Kind of got a sense of what the industry looks like? Stan, would you say that's about right?
I think that's a good outline for what my seminar is going to be like.
Okay. I'm going to look at more specifically the design phase and taking it from design to production. Okay, so design phase, there's 3 steps. Concept phase, this is where you're fleshing out the idea. Okay? Perfectly acceptable for it to be a Starbucks napkin, 3x5 card, a little notebook that you carry with you. If you have a PDA or a phone that has sort of like a notebook feature, writing in that's fine. But that's not necessarily the full concept phase. That's just getting the idea out. So you need to write it out as soon as it happens. As soon as that spark happens, you need to get to it, write it out, and then you need to flesh it out. Right? You need to find out what you think the game's going to look like, who you think it's going to appeal to, right? What are some of the components? And roughly, you know, you're trying to get it from this totally nebulous concept phase to more of what it's going to look like when you start working on it, okay? At this point, you really need to do research. You need to stop, once you have it done, stop and go out and try to find what's out there like you. You may find that you're in a very crowded market. And it's going to be difficult for you to differentiate your product from someone else's. Oh, mine's just like that game, but it's totally better. That's not going to do it, right? We talked about theme, right? Some themes may be oversaturated, but if you can do it in a unique way, you may make a niche, sort of like carve out sort of like a smaller ground within that larger area. Personally, I think that's a dangerous strategy because more likely you're going to be crushed. So going out and finding the underserved market, I think, is a better approach. Going out, especially at conventions like this, seeing the people who are standing around and looking bored, you're like, well, you're at a gaming convention. You should be having fun. And then they're missing something. Like there's a style of play that they have, they prefer, and they don't have a product for it. Find that person, make a game for them, and suddenly you have a market, right? Because chances are they're not the only one, right? So that's concept phase. I have a kind of standardized format for it now, and includes, you know, my name, when I created it, the sort of outline, sort of like abstract, an outline of the game in terms of how it plays, and then some of the components. And because I have done self-publishing and helped other designers get games to market, I know a lot about the product itself, like how to make the cards, a chipboard, what are standardized components and things like that. These are techniques that you use to bring the cost of the game down, okay? If you want to make it so that you have this totally awesome custom sculpt in your game, that's great. But if every single piece is like that, that's going to be a ridiculously expensive game, right? And price point, packaging are perhaps just as important as gameplay itself, right? So you want to not price yourself out of the market, okay? That's the other thing about research is you kind of know what those games cost. If they all cost $40 and your game costs $70, yeah, right? You're probably going to lose out. If they all cost $70 though, and yours costs $40, well, hell, you have a competitive advantage on that, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So you want to pitch it. You want someone else to make the game. You want it to be in a finished form, what I call the beta phase, cleaned up version of the game. I go to conventions. I do this sort of thing. People come up to me and they're like, "Hey, can you look at my game and help me polish it? And I say, sure, I can do that for you. And usually what they show me is not a beta. They show me an alpha. Alpha stage still has those errors in there, the glaring nuggets of error. Okay? Alpha stage, don't worry about the art. This is a game that's coming out next year. It's called Zephyr. Catalyst Games has it. You're basically playing ancient pilots. Every culture has a myth of flight. So, you come together and try to prove who among you is the best pilot. So you have like Icarus, flying wing and flying carpets and that kind of stuff. And you fly in these little magical air currents. So in my alpha stage, these are what my air currents look like. They're totally just cut up, little corrugated board with a Sharpie on it. Perfectly acceptable. If you're doing more than this, you're spending way too much time. And I've seen prototypes like that where they've got the totally awesome sculpted molds, and it's all like baked and like laser beams and all that kind of stuff. And then when you find out that one mechanic isn't necessary, and you need to like ditch it, now you have all that art and wasted components and all that time, and you feel like so hurt because you've invested all that effort into making it, and there's resistance, right? The point of the alpha stage is playtesting. So for a product that isn't necessarily a game, this is editing, right? So like books, this is the editing process, taking the concept and just whacking at it with that axe, finding the cool thing in there, and getting the rest of it off, right? A lot of games, they sort of go too far. They had that concept, and then they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they add all this stuff, bells and whistles, and in fact, if you had just made it the way it was originally, got straight to the fun, it would have been a lot better product.
Rather than saying that it's the editing phase, it's the outlining phase.
Right.
It's before you've written the book, you're putting all your pieces in order. I mean,
yeah.
If you're going to compare it
yes.
to writing.
Yes. Usually writers, they have that initial treatment, that document where they say, this is what the vision is, right? That's the very first step of the alpha stage. But getting it to beta is a long process, and that's where you have to do the reiterations, go over it line by line, and so on and so forth. The point of get to the fun also is you have to know what your vision is. So I have this little holiday-themed dice game. My girlfriend loves dice games. She loves Christmas. And I basically said, if I were a songwriter, I would write a song for her. I didn't. I made a game, so Amy, this is for you. This was essentially designed for that 15 minutes between or after dinner, where you're like, all right, dinner, come on up. We're all together, light, fast game, let's play. And then in alpha stage, I started fleshing it out, and I had this like, so this is Santa's workshop, basically little elves, working for Santa, trying to make presents, and very light game. And I had like this conveyor belt and this awesome mechanic with these things, like a timing thing. I'm like, what am I doing? That was not the original concept. 15 minutes after dinner or before dinner, yeah, you don't need a board. You don't need all that stuff. So take it down, get it out of there, and you'll have a much better game. Okay? How do you know when you have reached beta stage? This is very difficult, right? Very difficult for board games because often you're not making the game for yourself. You're making it for the audience, right? So if you're a chef, okay, if you're a chef, then you are making it the taste to your audience, right? So it's not what you like, it's what they like. And that's very difficult, which means you have to have them play it a lot and in different groups, okay? And if it looks like it's playing exactly the same each time, you've kind of got there. At which point, slap some art on it, get some nicer quality components, and move forward, okay? I have a little cover, just kind of for concept art, rules book. Your beta must have rules book. This one has cards, sleeves, perfectly fine. And I have a little art on there that I did, kind of mocked up just to have a feel of it. I get like Giggle Me plushie and that kind of stuff. And there you go. When you want to pitch the game, you have to assume that they're going to take this thing, okay? So just assume that when you actually get it to them, they're going to take it and leave. So if you put something really expensive in there, that's the cost of doing business. Okay? So don't be ridiculous in the production value of your beta. Okay? So that's where we're at. Now comes the pitch. How do you do this? This is very difficult. The pitch comes in 3 forms. Okay, there's the elevator pitch. This is the 10 to 15 second version of your game. Okay, if it's more than that, they have tuned out. Okay, it's a 1-line theme and a 1-line basically stat block that tells you who the intended audience is, number of players, that kind of thing. Okay? So for my first game, High School Drama, the one-liner is, High School Drama is, you want to time me? 10 seconds? 15 seconds? Someone's got it? All right, here we go. All right, High School Drama is an American-style card game where you're playing a teenager in high school trying to get your clique to take over the school. It's intended for 2 to 5 players, ages 12 and up. Okay, but that's the elevator pitch. Okay, you'll know immediately if they care, because they'll say yes, interested. Okay, if you're spending more time than that, you're not reading the subtle signs. You need to give them a way out, right? Because if they're upset with you, that's not going to make it. You're doing yourself a disservice, especially if you're pitching more than one game. Oftentimes, what I do, I go up to the publisher and I schedule a meeting, and we'll get to that in a second. And I'll have multiple products, right? And they'll say, okay, hit me with the pitch. How about this game? One-liner, target demographic, roughly what it's going to cost. Yes, no, maybe, all right? How about this one? No. How about this one? No. How about this one? Definitely no. How about this one? Oh, that sounds interesting, okay? At that point, you can go do the table spiel. This is at conventions. You'll see this a lot, where people walk up to you and you have your table, and you talk to them. Now you have 45 seconds. 45 seconds to about a minute. Anything more than that, and you've lost it. They're not playing the game. Okay? They just need to understand what it is, basically how it plays, who it's intended for, and roughly what the price is. Beyond that, they don't have time. Okay? Consumer doesn't have time. The publishers don't have time because they're seeing multiple designers, right? You need to be able to. It's basically elevator pitch plus a little bit more. Okay? And the most important part is what makes it cool, the unique selling points. Okay? And you can do basic concept of the core mechanics if it's a game, basic conflicts if it's a storyline, sort of like what the major arcs are, but not like don't spell it out for them. If they're interested at that point, they'll start talking about the cost of making the game, or publishing, or finding the right demographic, or going into marketing. And you'll see them spinning steps 2, 3, 4, and on, right? And that's good. That's when you got them, okay? If they're like glazed, no, it's not going to work. And that's okay. I'm not saying, remember, this is a product. All right? As a designer, you invested a lot of effort into the design itself, the mechanism that runs it, the unique theme, and all that kind of stuff. But for them, it's a game. What is a good game may not necessarily be a good gameplay, right? The experience, yes, but maybe it's not the most well-balanced game and that kind of stuff. They don't really care about that. They care about its packaging, its price, its demographic, and the experience that's in the box and the community that it can generate, right? If it's like totally elegant and like beautiful design and you can't understand the depth of the art, well, then the audience won't either. And they're going to make less money on it, right? So you need to get the elevator pitch down so you get the cool elements and move them forward. If you're lucky at that point, they'll say, I want to see this game. Sometimes, if you've done it right, you've scheduled enough time that you can actually do the walkthrough. Walkthrough is 5 10, maybe 15 minutes. You're not playing the whole game, right? You're playing enough to show how it plays, okay? Gameplay overview, you show them the rules, right? Give them a little outline of what the actions are, things like that. Show them the cards, show them the components, have them feel it, have them move around the board, do whatever, okay? You, at this point, have to show what the necessary components are, right? If it's a dice game, it must have dice. It may not necessarily have to have cards. Those cards could be tiles, they could be poker chips, they could be cubes, they could be whatever, right? But it must have dice, okay? The necessary components are things that are going to jack up the price, right? Because in terms of gameplay, they must be there, right? So if you have to have a custom sculpt for every single faction in your game, well, that's cool. That's really cool. But that will increase the price, right? The other stuff they can kind of work with, okay? And generally what I do is I present alternate themes, always, okay? I come up and I say, this is the vision I have for the game. But it could just as easily be something else, you know? And I try to make it so that they don't have to do the work themselves, okay? Some publishers don't, or some designers are very controlling in terms of creative control for the product, right? They won't let go of it. It must meet exactly my vision. If you're a prima donna, you're not going to get very far, okay? Because for the market, they may need to change the theme. They might need to find something that's edgier, cooler, trendier, whatever, right? And it's like they're perfectly fine with using your game, but like they need to put it someplace else. So is it okay if we make these pink instead of blue? And if you say no, you're making it very difficult, okay? It's a very small industry, so word will get around. And if you're a freelancer, you're going to be pitching to other people, and a lot of it is your brand, right, your reputation. So you need to have a good word, a good name for yourself, and a lot of that is how easy you are to work with, okay? So that's sort of the pitch. So we kind of have a feel for what the pitch looks like, 3 different types of pitches. I want to take a little minute. We have specific questions in the pitch. No? The difficult part is finding the audience, or finding the publisher that's going to be the right match for you, okay? You need to know their brand before you approach them. So like Mayfair, for example, does really well with European-style games, board games, that sort of audience. They came to me last year. They said, we have an April time slot. Would you like to submit a game for that? And I said, sure. Now, if I came to them with guns blazing game where there's like tons of dice and like lots of chips and there's like, you know, bloody splash art all over the place, they would probably just say no, right? But if I came to them with more kind of not peaceful, but like non-violent theme, and had a more elegant mechanic, kind of sophisticated bidding mechanic or something like that, components were nice, they would look at it, right? That's knowing the brand. But that splatter game would do perfectly well with another publisher, right? Make sense? So you need to know who they are, and you need to approach them in the right way. Generally, there's a submission guideline on their website. Follow it. Okay? If they say no outside submissions, don't send them anything, right? They'll just get mad at you. If they say, outside submission, please sign this document, you don't sign it, they won't see it. And they're not going to give you that thing back, okay? If they say, thank you for a submission, all I want is the initial treatment, don't send me components, don't send me alphas or betas or whatever, just sell me the idea, and they say yes, no, that's fine, okay? But you need to know what they want. And the best way, I think the best way is doing this in person. Going to the conventions, like New York Toy Fair, Gamma Trade Show, Gen Con, even now here at NeonCon, there are a lot of publishers that you can see them in person, and you can see the design person that heads the design team or who does the production for them. And they're just right there, and you can talk to them. But be respectful. Don't glom onto them. Hey, I got this idea. I got this game. Please, and like slip their manuscript under the bathroom stall, that kind of thing, or drop your prototype in their bag. That's not going to get you any favors. Okay. We're doing okay with sort of the pitch? Okay. You need to know your legal rights. This is your intellectual property. Okay? It's usually a copyright because you've written something, you've created something for it. It may be a trademark. Trademark is generally a name or a brand. Since you're designers, you're probably not going to have a trademark, right? Or it could be a patent or rules of play. If you have a patent on your game, probably Hobby Channel is not the best angle for you. It's probably better in more mainstream or gift and things like that. Okay, I can talk to you more about that if you want. I'm not a lawyer, right? And any advice I give you is pro bono consulting, so I'm not going to be caught on camera telling you what to do. Okay, but you are going to sell your intellectual property, whatever form it is. Okay, you're going to give it to them. You can either do this as work for hire or a license. Work for hire is strictly, hey, I want you to do this thing, sign here, and I will pay you this. And you do not own the rights to that game. Perfectly fine. I love doing that stuff, right? I did that for a Z-Man game. This is a game coming out, Monster Liner, next year. They're like, here you go. I want you to fill in these blanks. And I said, sure, sign. Thank you very much. If that game does really, really well, I see nothing of it. No royalties. That's okay, right? I was happy to have the work, right? If instead you want that to be yours, your baby, you want to give someone the right to publish it, that's a license, okay? And typically, you're going to be paid in forms of royalties, a percentage of sales. In this industry, something between 3 and 10% of sales is normal, and don't think you're getting the top margin. Okay? 8 to 10% is you're only going to get that if you have a product that's essentially finished, and then you just give it to them and they just reprint it. Or if you have an incredible brand of your own, like Bruno Faiduti, I love that guy. One of my favorite designers, put his name on a product. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get that. Rainer Knizia has that same following, Steve Jackson, James Ernst, Mike Sellinger, all those guys. You put their name on a product, and then it's like, oh, I'm going to buy that, right? Those guys will command a higher percentage. You are starting out. Your design skill is very low, right? Your stroke in the industry, your pitch is very weak, so you're not going to be able to negotiate way up, okay? Just be realistic about that. All right. Printer brought to you by the hotel? Okay. Okay. So that's essentially how it works. You can get an advance on your royalties. You can say, I'll do this, but you have to give me money in advance. Personally, my contracts require an advance. I don't like the idea of doing work and then hoping that it's going to do well later on. Okay. Because as a designer, you're only in control of phase 1, design phase. Right? If they flub the production value, right, and the game comes out and you're like, oh my God, it's a total embarrassment. How could you use those components? Or they're rotten, mildewy. Oh, we got this great deal from China. And it shows up on a container, and you open it up, and you can just smell the paint and all the water inside there, and you're like, oh my God, what have you done, right? You've lost control. That's, unless the creative control is in that contract, and it says, you must pass it through me, it's basically theirs. And so if you're getting an advance on a product that can't be sold, you're getting whatever, 3 to 10% of zero. Congratulations, right? So the advance protects you, and it forces them to be invested in the project. That's a very important part, because if they pay you. Nothing says commitment like money in hand, right? Seriously. So if they're putting down whatever money it is, whatever your advance is, now the accountant's like, hey, what are we doing with that? What, why do we send this money out if we're sitting on it? Like, it's going to grease the wheels and move things forward, okay? Contracts are very difficult. If you're not comfortable with them, you really need to get professional help, okay? I rewrite my contracts. If someone sends me a contract, I say, is it okay if I do this? And I'll write it back for them, and I'll say, how about these terms, right? Some people aren't comfortable with that. Because as a self-publisher, I had to do everything. I learned to put it all out there, and I do it in writing, and I learned to be not necessarily aggressive, but have a position and hold it and have it in writing, okay? At that point, hopefully, you have an agreement. If you're just, oh, sure, I'll sign whatever, dramatic flair. If you say, oh, just, yeah, fine, whatever, you sign off, don't come back to them whining. Like, hey, the game is successful now, I want a royalty. Like, well, you look at it, it's work for hire. You signed off all your rights to us. Sorry, right? Maybe they'll be nice, and maybe they'll say, let's work on a new project together, in which case I'll give you a nice share of it, but maybe not, okay? I'm about done here. Is that right? We got a couple more minutes. Let me just hit you with dealing with disappointment. Because right now, it sounds like, oh, it's going to be so awesome. This is very difficult. Thank you for your submission, but ... Okay? You're going to get this a lot with cold submissions. You need to have kind of a thicker skin. If you are wounded easily, emotionally, by rejection, don't be a freelancer, right? Because you're going to be rejected. And it's not because the game isn't good. Well, hopefully. It's not because the product isn't good. It's because it's not hitting the right market. Right? It's like, oh, that's awesome, but I don't know what to do with it. Oftentimes abstract games are like this. I have this game that's essentially very abstract, and people are like, oh, this is great. I love playing this. It's great, but I don't know how to sell it. Right? It's not necessarily the game. It's their skills, right? So dealing with submission, dealing with that thank you, but make sure that you did what they told you to do, right? Follow the guidelines. Know the brand, and be patient and persistent. Okay? Not glom on, alien face hugger every time I see you, constantly calling you, that kind of thing. That's you're off the list, right? But don't also be, oh, it's going to be cool, and just expect them to follow up with you, because they're very busy. And at conventions, if you got that time, you blocked out that half-hour time to sit down with them and hit with multiple pitches, and that's the only time you have for them, follow up afterwards. Say, thank you so much. I just want to make sure you have time to review it. Let me know if there's anything you need, art files, rules, whatever, that kind of stuff. Okay? Face-to-face disappointment. I really like the game, but. I mentioned this earlier. It may not be you. It just may be their skill set. And I know we signed the contract, but. This is very difficult. Okay, I'm not going to lie. Most freelancers understand this. Just because you said yes, and just because you have a handshake, and just because you sent them the prototype, and just because you have an initial rough draft and some emails of the contract, and just because you have a contract itself, doesn't mean that you're going to get paid per the contract, right? Delays are very common in the entertainment industry. So it's true for books, it's true for games, it's true for movies probably. And that's because the production schedule their production schedule is dictated by their market conditions and how much money they have and cash flow and all that kind of stuff. So they can only pay you when they have the money, and again, you're out of control with that. So, so that's where we're at. If you do have that, someone's reneged on your contract, seek legal support. Don't be a okay. Don't sue them. Don't go after them initially, but certainly you need to know what your rights are. Okay. Sort of where we're at. Do we have a little time for questions? Okay, so Ed's got the mic. Anyone out there have something that I didn't cover? This is sort of like a glossy view of the overview of this thing. I'm sure you guys have specific questions for your product or your market you're trying to get into. Any? Man, I knocked that thing out of the park then. I could read your mind.
I just had a quick question. As far as you mentioned rewriting your contracts and knowing about contracts and legal issues,
yeah.
What do you recommend as a resource to learn that kind of thing?
A lawyer.
An affordable resource.
Right. Then you need to be able to read and write very well in the English language, if that's your primary language. Just spell it out. Just say it. The intention of this is this, right? And it may not fly in court, but at least in writing it says this was the intent of this contract, and we both agreed to it. So that has some merit. But if you're going to try to stick them in some kind of like legally binding contract under some technicality, you really need to get legal support, right? I know it's expensive, but you get what you pay for. Right? So if your friend's like, oh, I'll do that for you, well, right. That's sort of where you're at.
Just a note for you. My uncle is a retired lawyer, and if you want to send me something, like a contract you got for someone, he'll review it for free and at least give you some pointers.
Look at this. Networking happening right here.
The other thing about attorneys is I've been in exactly the same situation where in the past where I've like, oh, I don't know if we need to do that. I can't emphasize enough what Bo is saying. It's penny wise and pound foolish to think you can do it on your own, to necessarily do it on your own. But the one thing that a lot of people don't realize about getting an attorney involved is that a lot of times if you do it right, particularly with contracts, it can be a one-time expense, and then you can carry that contract structure over.
Oh yeah, boilerplate.
So you build a boilerplate, and then it's a one-time expense, and you get to use it in multiple iterations, particularly if you're an artist or a game designer and you have a kind of standard starting point.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a review process. So if the other party wants to change a couple of things, that's fine. Then you bring it back to the attorney and you pay them to review it instead of write the contract and as from whole cloth in the beginning.
Right. Yeah. The thing for intellectual property, the importance is identifying who the creator is, where their rights are, what the structure of it is, like whether it's work for hire or license, the payment structure, and creative control, and the term, like how long they have it. There's a lot more you can do, but essentially if you got those in there, you're okay. And even if it's a very small contract or like a memo, if you have it in email, that's written form. I mean, it is accepted. I wouldn't go to court with it, but at least you can say, look, at this date and time, you agree to these terms, cut and paste, where's my payment? Or you said it would follow these, this pricing structure, or the components would look like the thing that you gave me. Why does it not look like that? Cut and paste, here you go, right? It's a small industry. Like I said, don't be if you're a prima donna and you're really fighting for that, then, you screwed my game over. Well, you might win that battle, but you're done. You're not going to get any more work. So it's a really difficult position to be in. You want to be nice because you want to come back to them with more games, but at the same time, you don't want to be too nice. Like you need to firmly say, this is what you've agreed to, where am I at? Sometimes you just need to wave your hands and say, hey, over here, and maybe you got dropped because they have a million other things going on, and they missed you, okay? So it may not be personal. It may not be a personal slight or an evil scheme to take over the world. It could just be, oh, well, I totally forgot about that. Sorry. Right? All right, so let's get to you.
My question was, you were talking about networking and finding your audience.
Yeah.
Not only just finding, I would say, fans, but on kind of like a professional level, where do you network with other professionals? Are cons the best?
Certain cons are better than others. For the executive gamer, the professional type, the freelancer, whatever, you want to be going to industry shows that are specifically like trade shows, right? Or it's not for the consumer, but for the publishers, distributors, marketing guys, all that kind of stuff, okay? Gamma Trade Show for hobby trade, for this hobby channel is really good. So, and that's usually in the spring, right here in Las Vegas. So if you're here at this show, it's probably easy for you to come back for that one. And that's run by the Games Manufacturers Association. You can get more information at gamma.org. That's a really good resource. And they have a whole panel track like what we're doing here, multiple tracks for freelancers, for retailers, for people trying to build a community. All that kind of stuff's there. So that's probably a really good resource. You can hit all of them at once. Beyond that, a lot of it's your own personal force of character, your personality, your charisma, whatever you want to call it. It's in this industry, a lot of it is you. People will buy into your product simply by your brand, right? Your name recognition. So if they trust you, if you developed a nice relationship with the community, they're much more willing to take a risk than if you're just some guy out of nowhere, right? And even at consumer conventions like this, or more consumer-oriented conventions like this one, you can still meet a lot of professionals. Alcohol, I'm not joking. It's a fantastic social lubricant. It's very easy to come up to someone like, let me buy you a drink. I have philosophical obligation to accept all drinks that someone gives to me. So I'm going to be at least talking to you, right? And it's probably true for a lot of people here. Or even, oh, hey, just a small conversation. Don't monopolize their time, but bring your face up to them. See them over and over at conventions, follow the circuit. Eventually, they'll see you, they'll see your name. My first year out, I went up to every single person. I made an effort to go to every single person, introduce myself, try to be nice, try to socialize and schmooze. That is an entire seminar separate from the pitch itself. But a lot of that skill is the same, and it's based on the same attribute if you're a gamer, right? It's the same social attribute, charisma. So developing that skill is important. And yeah, food, alcohol, favors, not so much, because you need to know your position, right? If you're a level 1 designer and you're coming up to someone that's like a level 20 executive, they really don't want to know your name, right? But they will say hi and thank you and so on. But if you come back to them again, and they're like, hey, I'm starting to see this guy again. And you get in early, and then if you need any help, let me know. You see them play testing a prototype, and you're like, I'll play that for you. I'll give you some feedback. Because when you're level 1, your pro bono consulting that's easy, right? That's just your opinion. So that's kind of a way to build up your image in the industry. And it's very small. It's a very small family. Word will get around, and once you get on to someone that's kind of like a thought leader, and they accept you, and then they'll introduce you to someone else, and you can basically level up that way, right? Cool?
One quick comment on that, too, is someone who's basically done that process over the last 3 years in helping develop this show. The quickest little mantra you can give yourself when you're trying to meet people in the industry is fan, not fanboy. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
You want to represent yourself and say, I enjoy your games, I enjoy what you work on, but understand the difference between being a fan and a fanboy, and that will go a long way to helping you kind of meter yourself as you go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you. Yeah. Well, so before the mic, I'll just reiterate. This is a professional relationship that you're getting into. You need to represent yourself professionally. So coming off, oh my God, I got this idea, it's great, and you like totally geek out. That's okay to a point to show your passion, but beyond that, you really need to scale it back, right? And you really need to understand your rights. You need to understand their perspective, what they can do with the product, how they can make money. It's not about you. You're, all things being equal, 20% of this equation. Okay, so understand you're maybe that initial cog that gets things going, but there's a lot more attached to that flywheel that makes that engine go. So,
basically, we used to give a class for freelancers at Wizards of the Coast at various conventions, and we talked a lot about getting to know people in the industry. And what Bo is saying is pretty dead on. When you meet them, the process we used to suggest was you meet them and you give yourself 2 minutes to talk to them.
Yeah, elevator pitch, right?
Right, yeah. It's the elevator pitch for you. It's like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I like such and such, or I'm interested in this. It's a pleasure to meet you. I really like your game. I'm looking forward to this. Do you have a card? Get their email, get the physical address of their office, and let it go and say, hey, I hope to get to talk to you later. And then after the show, send them an email. Say, thank you for talking to me. And then wait about 2-3 months, drop them another email. Say, hey, I met you at Gen Con, or I met you at Neon Con, and it was great to talk to you. I was thinking about this. Could I ask you a question and make it a simple one? Make up some BS question to ask them that's simple, that hopefully you can get them just to communicate with you. I was looking at your catalog and it said this. Are they really going to do that? Because I think it's similar to this other thing. Or, I am writing an article about this. Do you know where I could sell it? Something just to get the communication going. When Christmas comes, send them a Christmas card. When, it's kind of all like any kind of social schmoozing. You just want to get to the point, as Bo was saying, where when they see you, they say, oh, hey, Joe, yeah, I remember you. How's it going? Yep. So when they're talking to the new guy, they have a reason to talk to you first. And then when the opportunities arise, they will say to you, if you've asked them about articles, they say, hey, I know about an opportunity. And when that door opens, you jump on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the psychological, the science behind it, it's true. If you have a neutral stimulus, people don't really care about, yes or no, and that's usually the way you're treated when you're at a convention, and you just continue you just repeat it and show it over and over, people tend to like it more. So you're just trying to be there, increase your visibility. Don't push it too far, and then you'll be okay. And at that point, set up a pitch, be realistic, give them a specific time, show up, have your prototype, and go at it, okay? So I'm up at time, so if you guys are interested, I'm at the convention, I'm hanging out, I'm happy to talk to you about this kind of stuff more in detail. You'll be able to see this later, either at NeonCon or at Gen Con. They'll have the video for this, so if you want to catch it, that's cool. You can also follow me, Twitter, shifting_skies, or Facebook. Facebook's a great social network, so that's an easy way to get to it, right? So, all right. Good luck, guys. Thank you.